Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm excited to have Kate here with me hosting the webinar. I am Amy and I will be moderating today's session. Before we begin, I just wanted to let you know a little bit more about how the webinar will run. The webinar is being recorded and the slides and recording will be available for you within 3 business days. A short Q&A session will follow the presentation to answer any viewer submitted questions. During the webinar, you can submit questions you have using the webinar sidebar menu. Select the questions tab, type in your question, then hit the enter key on your keyboard. Remember, you can submit questions at any time throughout the presentation. That concludes my very brief introduction today. Kate, I will now pass it over to you. You may begin your presentation.
Thank you, Amy, and hello, everyone. My name is Kate Mastovska. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer for Residues and Contaminants at Eurofins US Food Division. I also have a global role within Eurofins, where I serve as the Technical and Industrial Director for Pesticides. And as such, I'm working with our experts and business leaders in Eurofins pesticide residue testing labs globally on different topics, including today's topic of ethylene oxide. So let me go to my next slide. From the global perspective, Eurofins is a large network of laboratories in more than 50 countries that provide testing services in many different areas, including food, environmental or pharmaceutical or cosmetics testing, and also services for agroscience, genomics, or forensics. This shows Eurofins' US food footprint with labs providing various testing, consulting, and product design services. And as for today's topic of ethylene oxide in food, there are 2 residue and contaminant testing labs in the US, one in New Orleans and one in Madison, Wisconsin. So what is ethylene oxide and why are we concerned about it? Under normal conditions, ethylene oxide is a gas. It has no color and is flammable. It is the smallest epoxide, so it's small and highly reactive, which makes it useful in many applications, but it is also a reason behind its toxicity. Ethylene oxide has been classified as group 1 carcinogen, as carcinogenic to humans, by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. The US Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, concluded that ethylene oxide is carcinogenic to humans by the inhalation route of exposure, and that there is evidence supporting mutagenicity and reproduction toxicity. The European Union, or EU, classified ethylene oxide as 1B mutagen, as 1B carcinogen, and 1B toxic compound for reproduction. Ethylene oxide is very important intermediate for production of other important chemicals, including mainly ethylene glycol, which is used in antifreeze or in production of, for example, polyester or polyethylene terephthalate. Another important product is polyethylene glycol, which has many uses in various products. It is also a food additive. And there are other important chemicals made from ethylene oxide, which is really mainly used in large-scale chemical production. Only a very small portion of the globally produced ethylene oxide is used directly for sterilization to inhibit microorganisms, including bacteria, fungi, or viruses. The main use is for sterilization of medical devices that cannot tolerate heat or moisture, including, for example, equipment with electronics and most plastic products such as catheters. And it is also used as food fumigant for microbial inhibition in certain foods. So how does it work? As I mentioned, ethylene oxide is highly reactive. It is a strong alkylation agent and reacts with various organic compounds, including enzymes and other proteins or DNA. This way, it denatures important functional proteins and enzymes and causes extensive damage to the DNA. And as a result, this alters cell metabolism, inhibits growth and reproduction. And as a very small molecule, it has high diffusivity and strong penetration properties, which makes it very effective in dry commodities. It is mainly used on commodities like spices, nuts, oil seeds, dried fruits and vegetables, or dried herbs and botanicals. When ethylene oxide is applied on food, it dissipates through evaporation and various reactions with the various food matrix components. Products are typically aerated after the application to speed the removal of free ethylene oxide. In products that are not aerated or are sealed, the decrease of ethylene oxide residues is slower. In addition to the reactions with organic compounds, ethylene oxide also reacts with chloride to form 2-chloroethanol. 2-chloroethanol is less volatile than ethylene oxide, so its removal by aeration is limited. And this compound serves as a marker residue for ethylene oxide use for regulatory compliance purposes. Ethylene oxide is regulated as a pesticide. In the US, the approved uses include the use on dried herbs and spices, licorice root, dried peppermint and spearmint tops, sesame seeds, dried vegetables, and walnut. And this table shows the US tolerances, which means maximum residue levels allowed on the commodities for ethylene oxide and 2-chloroethanol, which are very high, in very high ppm or milligram per kilogram levels. In the US, ethylene oxide is currently under registration review by the US EPA. And if you are interested, you can find a draft of EPA's ethylene oxide risk assessment on the EPA website. In the European Union, in the EU, ethylene oxide is not approved as food additive, as food fumigant. Sorry, its use for this application has been banned since 1991, and as such, maximum residue levels or MRLs have been set at limit of quantification or LOQ, reasonably achievable in different commodities, and they are set for the sum of ethylene oxide and 2-chloroethanol expressed as ethylene oxide, which is the residue definition for ethylene oxide in the EU. Here is the overview of the MRL levels set at reasonable LOQs, which is denoted by the asterisks behind the number. For less complex commodities such as fruits, vegetables, or cereals, the MRL is set at 0.02 milligram per kilogram. For medium complex matrices like nuts or oil seeds, it's set at 0.05 milligram per kilogram. And for highly complex matrices like teas, coffee, herbal infusions, or spices, it is set at 0.1 milligram per kilogram or 100 ppb. So for oil seeds, including sesame seeds, the EU MRL for the sum of ethylene oxide and 2-chloroethanol expressed as ethylene oxide is 0.05 milligram per kilogram. When we compare this to the US tolerances for ethylene oxide and 2-chloroethanol, and when we express the main residue of 2-chloroethanol as ethylene oxide, we get a tolerance of little over 500 milligram per kilogram, which is about 10,000 times higher as compared to the EU MRL. And it is quite similar scale for other commodities with tolerances in the US. The reason why I highlighted sesame seeds is because findings of ethylene oxide residues above the EU MRL in this commodity, in sesame seeds, started the ethylene oxide crisis in Europe in September 2020, when Belgium reported or posted the first alert notification in the EU Rapid Alert System in Food and Feed, RASF, related to ethylene oxide residues in sesame seeds coming from India. This started, I would say, an avalanche of follow-up actions and additional notifications for sesame seeds and related products, which led to withdrawals and recalls in various EU countries. At the beginning of October 2020, the EU Commission had an emergency meeting about this issue, which led to the implementation of regulation that requires 50% of sesame seeds coming to the EU from India to be tested for pesticide residues, including ethylene oxide. But sesame seeds and related products were not the only product group that got under scrutiny for ethylene oxide residues in the EU. If you look at notifications in the Rapid Alert System, you will also find many entries for example, the group of various spices, dried herbs, and also vegetables such as dried onions. More recently, there are notifications for various dietary supplement products and ingredients, various botanicals, powders, and extracts such as psyllium husk, ginseng, turmeric, ginger, ashwagandha, and so on. In addition to that, there have been also findings of ethylene oxide residues in empty capsules, specifically in HBMC, hydroxypropyl methylcellulose capsules. And last but certainly not least, there have been many issues and concerns related to ethylene oxide residues in food additives, specifically in thickening or stabilizing agents, mainly in locus bean gum, but also in guar gum and xanthan gum, because they are used in many products, such as ice creams, which also became subject of recalls when contaminated additives were used in their production. And when it comes to food additives, there is EU regulation 231 from 2012, which provides specification for food additives in the EU. This regulation specifically says that ethylene oxide may not be used for sterilizing purposes in food additives. So it bans the use of ethylene oxide on food additives. And this regulation also specifies ethylene oxide limit of no more than 0.2 milligram per kilogram for additives that involve ethylene oxide in the production, such as in polyethylene glycol or in polysorbates. This specific limit is for free ethylene oxide only, so it is not for the sum with 2-chloroethanol. But there has been no specification for ethylene oxide in thickening agents in these additives, like locus bean gum, and also it was not completely clear how to handle products which used contaminated thickeners, but may not have any detectable ethylene oxide residues in the final product. And to clarify this and some other important questions, the EU Commission had a meeting with the member states and experts, and then communicated some of the following conclusions, which are very important for handling of the crisis. Number one, products on the EU market that use locus bean gum contaminated with ethylene oxide residues above 0.1 milligram per kilogram must be withdrawn from the market and recalled from the consumers. Also, it concluded that 0.1 milligram per kilogram as the sum of ethylene oxide and 2-chloroethanol expressed as ethylene oxide is applicable as the MRL for food and feed additives for the purposes of the management of this contamination incident. And this is applicable to all additives except the additives that I mentioned previously, except those that have the ethylene oxide specifications set in the regulation, such as polyethylene glycol or polysorbates. But it's applicable to all the others. including, for example, calcium carbonate, which also had several notifications in the rapid alert system. And for feed that used a contaminated additive or ingredient, it has to be withdrawn from the market if the residues of ethylene oxide are above 0.02 milligram per kilogram. What about some other, let's say, complicated cases? For composite foods, such as instant noodles, which also had findings for ethylene oxide residues, if there is no information about the use of non-compliant ingredient, then the MRL is set at 0.02 milligram per kilogram. However, if there is an evidence that a non-compliant ingredient was used, meaning ingredient with ethylene oxide residues above the regulatory limit, then this product has to be withdrawn or recalled or rejected at the EU border. For food supplements, for consistency purposes, the applicable MRL is 0.1 milligram per kilogram, and this includes capsules used for production of food supplements. For infant and baby foods, if an ingredient was above 0.1 milligram per kilogram, then the final product has to be withdrawn from the market and recalled from the consumers, regardless the ethylene oxide residue level in the product. And if the ingredient or if the ingredients were in compliance, but the final product contains residues above 0.01 milligram per kilogram, above 10 ppb, then it also needs to be withdrawn or recalled. So this is clearly a quite complicated residue and also regulatory situation, which requires suitable analytical methods to support the compliance testing. At the beginning of this crisis, our European Competence Center, Eurofins Dr. Specht Laboratory in Hamburg, Germany, used the German official method for ethylene oxide residues, which converts 2-chloroethanol to ethylene oxide and then converts the released ethylene oxide to 2-iodoethanol. This method is quite complicated and requires specialized glassware, which makes it difficult for scaling up and for providing fast turnaround time for the analysis of large number of samples that's been needed in the crisis situation. As alternative options, there is a method which was published by Tatiana Bononi in 2006, which converts ethylene oxide to 2-chloroethanol and then analyzes the total 2-chloroethanol, so it provides the sum of the residues. It is also possible to analyze the residues directly. For example, headspace sampling has been used for analysis of free ethylene oxide, or it is possible to analyze both ethylene oxide and 2-chloroethanol by Ketcher's methodology. However, the direct analysis of ethylene oxide has a lot of challenges due to its high volatility and small molecular weight. For example, it is quite difficult to routinely handle reference standards for ethylene oxide, potential selectivity issues, and it's also the chromatography is also more complicated because of the volatility and small size of the molecule. And so for these reasons, our German lab decided to combine principles of the original official German method and the method published by Tatiana Bononi, and developed a method which converts ethylene oxide to 2-iodoethanol and analyzes 2-iodoethanol and 2-chloroethanol using gas chromatography with tandem mass spectrometry, GCMS-MS. This provides robust routine analysis in a wide range of food matrices and enables separate reporting of ethylene oxide, 2-chloroethanol, as well as the sum down to 0.01 milligram per kilogram, down to 10 ppb. And this method was further optimized and implemented in our US labs in New Orleans and in Madison through collaboration with our German colleagues. And I would say that this and other collaborations within our global network have been really useful for managing this ethylene oxide crisis and supporting clients in different regions. We currently have 12 laboratories in 7 countries testing ethylene oxide residues in foods. This includes 2 labs in India, 2 labs in China, and 1 lab in Vietnam. In Europe, there are 2 labs in Germany, 1 in France, and 2 in Spain. And last but not least, 2 labs in the US. And with that, I would like to acknowledge many Eurofins colleagues that have been involved in the ethylene oxide analysis, and specifically colleagues from Eurofins Dr. Specht in Germany, Eurofins Central Analytical Laboratories in New Orleans, and Eurofins Food Chemistry Testing in Madison, Wisconsin. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and will be happy to take questions.
Thanks so much for that, Kate. I am going to just go ahead and launch a poll here. So if you liked what you heard today and you want a Eurofins representative to follow up with you after the event, please select yes, and we will follow up with you. We will move into the Q&A portion here. It looks like we've gotten several questions that have come in the chat. Just as a reminder, if we don't have the time today to address your question during the presentation, we will follow up with you with a personalized message after. So just know that if your question is not answered, certainly don't worry, we will get in touch with you. Kate, the first question that has come in here, was there a particular reason for the use of ethylene oxide on sesame seeds in India?
Well, this was very likely for the control of salmonella because there have been alerts about salmonella contamination in sesame seeds from India, which actually led to regulation requiring 20% of sesame seeds coming to the EU from India to be tested for salmonella. So likely salmonella was the reason behind the use of ethylene oxide on sesame seeds in this case.
Okay, thank you. And then kind of a follow-up question looking at another question in here. Were there any alerts or notifications for other oil seeds besides sesame?
Yeah, well, in addition to sesame seeds and various related products, there were many different products which included sesame seeds, you know, like tahinis or baking mixes and bakery products. But in addition to that, I've seen also notifications for example, flax seeds or linseed seeds, and also sunflower seeds.
Okay, great, thank you. And then question here, how do you ensure acceptable method performance across all of the Eurofins labs?
Well, every lab conducts method validation and they use appropriate routine quality controls. And when available, the labs participate in proficiency tests, testing programs. For instance, many of our labs participated last year in ethylene oxide proficiency test in sesame seeds, which was organized by the EU reference lab in Germany. On top of that, we also organized an internal proficiency test on ethylene oxide residues in complex spice samples, which show that we can obtain comparable results in different Eurofins labs globally. And this included the 2 of our US labs testing ethylene oxide. So, number of different measures, including also internal proficiency tests.
Great, thank you. And it looks like we have one other question here that has come in. Which other residues could be detected in food samples treated with ethylene oxide?
Ethylene oxide reacts with many different things in foods. So in addition to the residues of free ethylene oxide and 2-chloroethanol, there are also residues for example, 2-bromoethanol or ethylene glycol. But these were not selected as suitable marker residues for ethylene oxide to use. So only ethylene oxide and 2-chloroethanol are the residues relevant for the regulatory compliance testing according to both EU and US regulations.
Great, thank you. And it looks like I'm pretty caught up here. So in case there are any other questions that do come in, like I mentioned, we will follow up with you. And I know that there have been a lot of other questions that have come into the chat. So I just want to remind everyone that a recording of this webinar, along with a copy of the slides that Kate presented, will be available to you within 3 business days. So in case you want to reference any of that information after, we'll certainly be sending that out. I want to thank you again, Kate, for your expertise and your presentation today. And thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.